Have you ever wondered what someone imprisoned for the worst of all crimes says in the final minutes of their life? Imagine the scene. The prison clock strikes the final hours, cold lights illuminate the empty cell, and a folded, almost forgotten piece of paper is removed from a dusty safe. The secret document found years after the execution. Those words, so simple yet so weighty, shatter the silence like a stifled scream. The sound of the paper unfolding echoes off the cold walls, and suddenly you are there, breathing the same air someone breathed when they knew their end was inevitable. It's not just a note. It's a voice that spans years, a last-ditch attempt at communication from someone who saw the abyss up close and decided, nonetheless, to leave something behind. You feel that chill down your spine because it's not just about death, it's about what's said when life offers no return. The document begins to reveal short, dry sentences, charged with a tension that allows no distractions. And then, between one line and the next, words emerge that should never have been written, but now escape their limits, invading the reader's mind and leaving a question impossible to ignore. What did he really want to confess? As you stare at those lines, the feeling that something is wrong sets in. The air grows heavy, each word weighs on you as if you were inside that cell, alone, with a condemned man whose gaze you can't see but feel. And there's a strange immediacy to it. The fear, the guilt, the doubt. Have you ever experienced this? Not literally, of course, but that chill in your stomach, that chill when you realize that not everything can be controlled, not everything can be explained. This is the psychological blow that hits us. Realizing that there are stories that refuse to die, that infiltrate our minds long after we believe they were buried. And then comes the silence, almost as dense as death itself. A silence that screams louder than any confessional, louder than any witness who has ever tried to tell the truth before. That document doesn't just reveal words. It reveals intentions, secrets, and a perception of the world that few have the courage to face. It's as if each sentence has been measured, honed to remain alive, even when the author's body can no longer move. This is where curiosity begins to burn. What you're about to discover may surprise you because the document doesn't just narrate facts, but reveals layers of criminal psychology, manipulation, pain, and regret. But before we delve deeper, there's something you need to understand. The document wasn't found by chance. It emerged from years of silence, hidden among forgotten archives, protected by walls that witnessed nothing but held everything. And this detail changes everything. Because when something like this appears, the impact isn't just emotional, it's almost physical. It touches something inside you, something that recognizes the tension, doubt, and truth hidden behind the mask of normalcy we all wear. Now take a deep breath because we're about to delve into layers no one has dared to explore before. And with each line we reveal, you'll realize that what seemed like a simple document is actually a portal into the mind of someone who confronted death with coolness and intelligence. But be warned, nothing will be explained in an obvious way and nothing will be completely certain. Every detail we reveal will carry the weight of doubt and curiosity. And it's in that moment, in that tense instant between what we know and what we'll discover, that you need to prepare to cross the threshold. Because the next step isn't just reading words, it's feeling the presence of someone who left their last truths imprinted in silence, and yet managed to involve us in their final plot. The document didn't emerge by coincidence. It emerged from the shadows, from an archive no one else visited, protected by cold corridors and cameras that recorded only emptiness. Years passed, and yet it remained hidden, as if waiting for the right moment to reveal its truth. What was written there wasn't just a memory or a hasty confession. It was a meticulous construction, the result of a mind that spent years reflecting on decisions, on life itself, on the impact of each action. When finally found, it seemed to have been written to test us, to bring face to face the hidden truth that many try to ignore. It's impossible not to feel, reading those lines, that each word carries the silent transformation of someone who passed through an abyss and survived only in the memory of their own choices. What makes us pause before this document is not only what is written, but what is implicit between the lines. A cold, strategic mentality permeates the entire text. It's a narrative mingled with regret, but also with manipulation. Each sentence is measured, each point calculated. You feel, almost physically, the tension of the writer, knowing that no one can dispute the power of his words. It's as if death itself has become a stage, and he is there, controlling everyone's perception, from the silent cell to those who, years later, would open the envelope without knowing what they would find. The psychological blow is accurate. It makes us question not only the justice meted out, but also our own interpretations of guilt, redemption, and human nature. Have you ever wondered how often decisions made under pressure, in the heat of the moment, can generate consequences no one is prepared to face? This document is living proof that every choice leaves invisible traces, and that some truths can only emerge much later, when everything seems definitive. As we explore these lines, we begin to realize that the behind-the-scenes nature of the execution is more complex than any official account. There are details that never appear in the reports. The guards' gazes, the silence of the prison, the routine of those cold walls that seem to hold the secrets of entire lives. He describes these moments in an almost cinematic way, with nuances of tension and expectation, revealing a keen perception of the world that few could comprehend. There is an almost surgical precision in how he recounts every gesture, every sound, every movement that precedes the inevitable. It is a fragmented but engaging narrative that forces us to piece together the puzzle mentally, connecting loose ends and reconstructing the experience of someone who was about to face their own death. And even in this desperate scenario, there are signs of dark humor, of irony, small sparks of personality that insist on manifesting themselves, as if the author himself wanted to remind us that behind the crime, there was someone capable of thinking, reflecting, and perhaps even manipulating until the final moment. But the document doesn't limit itself to revealing emotions. It contains information that at first glance seems trivial, but which, when analyzed more deeply, reveal layers of meaning never before officially explored. Words about secret meetings, comments on officers' behavior, details about prison routines. All of this creates a panorama that challenges what we've been told so far. It's impossible not to feel a growing curiosity. Why did he choose these exact words? What is the true intention behind each line? Each sentence seems to carry the responsibility of provoking, of instigating questions, of keeping the reader's attention captivated by a web of thoughts and possibilities. The emotional impact is profound because we realize we are faced with something that not only documents but also manipulates, guides, and, in a way, demands participation. You feel invited to decipher, to interpret, to understand what no one dared reveal while he was still breathing. And then comes the disturbing realization: the document is not linear. It alternates between memories, reflections, subtle threats, and shocking revelations, creating a narrative spiral that keeps us on the brink of discovery. You can't simply read and move on. You have to stop, reflect, and feel the weight of each word. Every emotionally charged detail and every fragment of revelation forces us to confront the complexity of the mind of someone who was already beyond the reach of life. At times, the writing is almost poetic, describing sounds, smells, sensations of heat and cold, of waiting and anticipation. At others, it becomes direct, almost brutal, showing that the truth, when finally written, does not bend to time or oblivion. It is a play of light and shadow, of silence and screams, that captivates us without us realizing how deeply we are already involved in the narrative. With each paragraph, new questions arise, some nearly impossible to answer. Who truly benefits from this document? Who kept it hidden and why? And, above all, to what extent can we trust the words of someone who has faced the extremes of human existence? Curiosity is irresistible because we know that every detail he chose to record was designed to provoke impact, to generate unease, and to make each reader become part of the story, even if involuntarily. It is at this point that the document ceases to be just paper and ink. It transforms into a psychological experiment, a window into an abyss most of us would never dare to face. And it is impossible not to feel the tension growing, because each sentence brings us closer to a partial, fragmented understanding, forcing us to imagine the unspoken scenarios, the hidden feelings, the decisions that shape that story. As you follow these lines, you begin to notice patterns you hadn't noticed before. References to events outside the prison, allusions to people who may never have been investigated, hints of hidden truth that challenge official records. It's as if the author is guiding us through a labyrinth of information, offering clues about his own mind and the world around him. Each discovery has a subtle, almost imperceptible impact, but enough to shake our perceptions of justice, guilt, and consequences. And even with all this emotional density, there are moments when an almost disturbing lightness emerges, as if he's playing with the reader, testing our ability to absorb, process, and feel. Tension mingles with curiosity, and you realize you're not just observing a story, you're a part of it, feeling every choice, every regret, every manipulation. And it is at this point that the narrative begins to unfold in multiple layers. The document reveals more than the crime itself. It shows us the inner workings of a mind that lived between reason and instinct, between pain and calculated coldness. There are nuances of transformation, shifts in perception, and strategies that shape decisions that forever altered lives. You feel you are faced with something rare, almost forbidden. A story that transcends time, that speaks of power, fear, manipulation, and impact. Each word is an open door, and with each step you realize that the story is not just being told. It is being lived, experienced, absorbed, and this creates an almost physical tension, an emotional weight that remains even when your gaze moves away from the paper. And even as these layers unfold, the mind continues to spin, trying to fit the pieces together, trying to comprehend the meaning of each word, the intention behind each choice, the effect all of this might have on the reader. The narrative is continuous, hypnotic, designed to keep you glued to the story so that each revelation, each detail, each whisper of hidden truth keeps your attention. And as you follow these lines, the feeling is that something even greater is coming, something that will challenge not only your understanding but also your perception of what is real and what is manipulated. The document's history, its contents, and its implications begin to intertwine, building a landscape of suspense, mystery, and revelations few would dare explore. And as the author's mind unfolds before our eyes, curiosity becomes insatiable, and anticipation grows, leaving you exactly where you need to be, suspended between the revealed truth and the secrets that still remain hidden, waiting to emerge. The document opens like a portal into the mind of someone who seemed to hover between reality and delirium, between guilt and manipulation. Each sentence is a small blow, nonviolent, but one that penetrates the door of perception and leaves an invisible mark, as if directly touching his own ability to understand right and wrong. He writes coldly, but there's something deeply human between the lines, a vulnerability no one would expect from someone capable of such extreme acts. Words that might seem cold at first glance carry layers of emotion, buried memories, fragments of an entire life condensed onto paper yellowed by time. And it is at this point that the confession becomes an enigma. He says much, but at the same time seems to conceal the essential, as if aware that the full truth could be more devastating than any sentence ever handed down. As you read, you realize that this isn't just about reporting facts. It's about manipulating the reader, playing with their perception of what's real and what may have been constructed to confuse them. There are details that seem trivial, almost banal, about daily life in the prison, about the guards' habits, about the conversations that took place in silent corridors, but each of these elements carries impressive emotional and psychological weight. He constructs a narrative that blends meticulous observation with deep introspection, as if he were reflecting on every decision that brought him to that cell and, at the same time, setting a trap for the reader. It's the perfect psychological trick, the confession that isn't fully surrendered, the truth that seems to slip through the fingers of those trying to hold it. And then there are moments when the writing becomes almost poetic, describing sounds, smells, and physical sensations in such detail that you feel for a moment like you're right there in the cell, breathing the same heavy air, sharing the fear, loneliness, and tension of someone who knows time is running out. He mentions the footsteps of the guards, the creaking of the doors, the whispers of other distant inmates, and every little detail serves to create a sense of total immersion. You find yourself trying to imagine the scene, feeling the emotional impact of these observations, and at the same time, trying to decipher what's hidden between the lines. It's as if he's playing with your mind, testing your ability to separate truth from deception, reality from manipulation. The enigma deepens when he mentions specific events that only someone directly involved could know, small details that contradict official versions, fragments of information that should have remained forgotten. And then the inevitable question arises: was he confessing or creating a narrative to manipulate future interpretations? Each sentence carries an almost physical impact, a sense that the truth, the complete truth, is always one step beyond what is revealed, always out of reach, always provoking unease. It's impossible not to feel the tension build because you realize you're not just reading words, you're being drawn into a mind that has faced the extremes of human experience, a mind that understands the power of perception and doubt. As we read on, we realize that the document not only describes events but also reveals internal transformations, shifts in mindset, reflections on past decisions, regrets, rationalizations, and even small justifications that he inserts as if they were pieces of a puzzle that only he can complete. Every observation about the prison's behind the scenes, every detail of the execution routine, every recollection of interactions with other convicts or guards, all of this intertwines with a clear intention: to leave an indelible mark, something that survives the test of time, something that challenges the reader to look within themselves as they try to understand what really happened. You realize you're not just witnessing a criminal's confession, you're being led to explore the limits of morality, perception, and hidden truth. The document also contains reflections on the power of narrative, on how stories shape people's perceptions, on how a confession can become a tool of manipulation even after death. He analyzes almost clinically the impact of his own words, recognizing that each written line could provoke shock, fear, or doubt, and he seems satisfied with this ability to influence, to generate transformation even while physically absent. There is a keen awareness that his words would endure for years, reaching anyone willing to listen, and that even after his execution he would still have some control over the interpretation of the facts, over the narrative that would live on. And amidst all these layers of manipulation, reflection, and revelation, a silent question arises that echoes in the reader's mind. Did the confession that never arrived really matter? Or was the emotional and psychological impact it could have long after his execution more important? Each sentence challenges not only our perception of the crime, but also our own ability to judge, understand, and deal with the truth when it is presented in a fragmented and strategic way. And as you feel the weight of each word, you begin to realize that you're dealing with something greater than a simple document. You're dealing with an intense psychological experience, a deep dive into the mind of someone who understood how time, memory, and perception could be manipulated to create a lasting effect. Every partial revelation, every detail that seems out of place, every subtle reference to unknown events or hidden truths, all contribute to a narrative that not only informs but transforms, challenges, and captivates the reader, keeping the tension alive as we approach what truly matters, the essence of what he wanted to record, and the impact those words still have on those who dare to confront them. And even as you absorb every nuance, every line, every shadow of intent, there is a growing sense that something even greater is about to emerge from the pages, something that will once again challenge the perception of crime, guilt, truth, and the effect it all has on those who dare to investigate and reflect on every decision, every mindset, every manipulation that lurks between the lines, waiting to be uncovered. As you feel the weight of these words, as each line of the document sinks into your mind, I want you to realize something. This isn't just another video. It's a space where mystery, hidden truth, and stories that time has tried to bury come together. And for stories like this to continue reaching you so that we can explore together the behind the scenes, the secrets, the forgotten documents, and the confessions no one dared reveal, it's important that you actively participate with us. Subscribing to the channel isn't just a gesture. It's allowing this investigation to continue. It's ensuring that every detail, every nuance, every revelation has a path to be discovered and shared. Each subscription is like lighting a candle in the dark hallway of this narrative, keeping the light burning so the next secret can emerge, so the next hidden document can be found, so the full story isn't lost in the silence. Have you ever felt that sense of inextinguishable curiosity, that desire to know what comes next, to feel every emotion as if you were inside the cell, next to the one who recorded it all? That's exactly what we seek here together. A place where every attentive eye, every curious mind, contributes to keeping the investigation alive, so that every hidden detail, every forgotten clue comes to life. And as you reflect on this, remember, your participation makes a difference. Not just for the channel but for the meaning of each story told, for the emotional impact it causes, for the continuity of what time has tried to erase. Your subscription is what allows us to continue searching archives, translating secrets, and bringing to light every document the world wanted to forget. So, if you feel like following me, if you want to continue discovering what no one else dares to reveal, click to subscribe. But do so not as an obligation, but as a silent commitment to the hidden truth, to the layers of the human mind that have yet to be explored, to every mystery that still awaits revelation. Each subscription is a partnership, and together our curious minds keep alive the search for what lies beneath the surface, for the impact, the thrill, and the understanding of what really happened. And now, as you process this, as you feel the weight of those words and the silence that lingers after each sentence, realize, the story isn't over yet. The document holds even more secrets, details that only emerge to those who truly allow themselves to delve deeper, to those who keep their eyes open and their minds ready for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, disturbing, or impossible to ignore. Follow every line, every whisper hidden within the text, and know that your presence here, your attention, your curiosity, is what keeps the thread of this narrative alive. Because stories like this cannot die in oblivion. And what comes next will still surprise you. As you delve deeper into the document's lines, you begin to notice something unsettling. There are pauses, interruptions, words chosen with almost surgical care, and between them, a silence that screams louder than any statement. The silence is unnatural. It carries the feeling that something has been deliberately omitted, hidden. Experts who study similar cases call this forced silence, a phenomenon where documents or confessions are censored, removed, or kept from the public, not by accident but by clear intention. This is where the first controversy arises with force. Could the state have interfered, erasing the final voice of a condemned man who could no longer defend himself? Every line that has survived carries echoes of this manipulation, suggesting that the full truth was never meant to be known. Do you feel it? The tension that builds when you imagine that, behind the cold routine of a prison, there's a network of decisions and interests that control what reaches us? It's not just about crime, guilt, or justice. It's about who holds the power to decide which narrative will be preserved and which will be forgotten, buried among official reports, protocols, and sealed boxes. The document, in its current form, already bears traces of resistance to this censorship. Cutting sentences, allusions that challenge official versions, clues to what has been hidden. And as you read, you realize that every word, every fragment, is a silent battle between the truth that wants to emerge and the silence imposed for decades. And it's at this point that I want you to do something for me. Stay with me until the end. Not as a mere request, but as an invitation to experience this investigation in its entirety, to feel the full impact of the revelations yet to come. Because there are hidden layers, details no one has dared to officially record, truths that can only be felt when you allow yourself to follow every nuance, every fragment, every silence the document leaves behind. Stay with me until the end and you'll see that the reward isn't just knowing the facts, but understanding the depths of the human mind, the behind-the-scenes decisions that shape destinies, and the silent effect that words left behind can have decades later. As we continue, it's impossible not to notice how the document plays with the reader's perception. There are moments when it seems intent on confusing, inserting subtle doubts about the responsibility of each act, about who truly benefits from each decision. It describes interactions with guards, observations of cellmates, even small details that, at first glance, might seem irrelevant. But each line carries weight, each reference to a past event functions as a key to unlock layers of meaning not meant for prying eyes. And you sense, with every word, that you're walking through a narrative that challenges your own perception of justice, morality, and control. There's something almost ritualistic about the way he describes these behind-the-scenes scenes. Footsteps echoing through the corridors, doors creaking, whispered voices that disappear before they can be fully understood. Every detail serves to create a sense of total immersion, that you're inside the prison, breathing the same heavy air, feeling the same silent anticipation the condemned man felt as he wrote. And at the same time he plants small provocations that challenge the mind. Who really decides what will be remembered? Who controls history? Each question isn't just rhetorical, it's an open door to reflections on power, memory, and manipulation. And even with all this care, there are moments when the documentary becomes almost poetic. It describes not only the environment, but also the psychological effects of waiting, isolation, and the knowledge of the end. Every sensation is accurately described. The cold that penetrates the bones, the silence that tightens the chest, the weight of past decisions accumulating on the mind. There's a subtle skill in transforming every quotidian detail into a revelation, a piece that contributes to building tension and curiosity. And you feel that every line was designed to keep your attention, so that each small fragment of information becomes a thread of suspense that pulls you deeper, without you realizing how far you've already been taken. But the big question remains: why did this note only surface years after the execution? Why was it hidden, seemingly forgotten, when crucial truths could have been known earlier, when lives could still have been affected? Every reference to previous events, every insinuation of manipulation and censorship, creates a complex web that blends reality, interpretation, and survival strategy. And it is precisely this complexity that keeps the tension alive, that transforms reading into an emotional, almost physical experience. You feel the pressure of the narrative, the weight of the silence, the urgency of what is being revealed, even decades after the original events. And between these lines, between the fragments that have withstood the test of time, signs begin to emerge of a mind that understood its own mortality and yet chose to leave clues. Clues that challenge the reader to think, to question, to reconstruct events in a fragmented way, almost as if it were necessary to enter his mind to understand what he truly meant. Every behind-the-scenes detail, every reference to prison routine, every ambiguous phrase functions as a small, strategic revelation, designed to generate impact, to shake the perception of time, truth, and responsibility. And this is where the tension grows. The document doesn't reveal everything, it never does. It builds layers upon layers, alternating between confession and enigma, between reality and perception, between what was experienced and what remains hidden. Every word carries intention, every silence carries power. You feel like you're participating, breathing along with him, and that each step forward reveals a little more of the transformation of his mindset, the complexity of his decisions, and the effect this still has on those who dare to observe. As you absorb each fragment, you realize that the true impact lies not only in what was written, but in what remains hidden, in what can only be intuited, in the hidden truths that defy explanation, in the echoes of silence that still resonate through the cold prison corridors. And as this awareness sets in, the story slowly unfolds before your eyes, keeping you hooked on every word, every shadow, every sigh the document still carries. The game of revelations continues, and with each detail that emerges, the mind is forced to follow, to decipher, to feel the emotional and psychological impact of what has survived time and censorship. And you realize without realizing it, that you are involved in something greater than a simple story. You are within a labyrinth of intentions, manipulations, decisions, and truths that have been left behind, waiting to be discovered. And as this realization unfolds, the story remains alive, breathing alongside you, ready to unfold the next layer of mystery that still remains hidden. The document becomes something far beyond mere writing. It becomes a bridge between life and death, between the final moment and the memory that lingers afterward. He describes every detail of the execution with unsettling precision. The metallic click of the machine, the dull echo of the doors closing, the whispers of the guards who dare not look directly, and even his own breathing, which seemed synchronized with his own, heavy, ritualistic, almost as if time had slowed to observe his every movement. The effect is almost cinematic, but there are no cameras, no artificial script. Just a human mind condensing decades of experience, fear, and observation into words that have traversed time. And the feeling that he was already dead even before the final moment is impossible to ignore. There is a meticulous awareness of one's own end, a control of the narrative that leaves the reader tense, mesmerized, and at the same time, uncomfortably close to something that should never be seen so intimately. As you read, you begin to realize how every seemingly trivial detail carries deep layers of meaning. He doesn't just describe the physical environment of the prison. He reveals the very mindset of someone who spent years reflecting on his decisions, on the transformation that each act, each choice, wrought in his life and the lives of those around him. There are moments when he makes observations about the behind the scenes, about the routine that repeated itself almost ritually, about how small decisions within the prison could alter the course of everyone's lives there. And these observations are not neutral. They are charged with impact, with an awareness of one's own influence, of the capacity that words have to endure for years, to have an effect even after death. Have you ever stopped to consider the effect a confession can have when written to stand the test of time? When each sentence is calculated not just to convey a story, but to provoke reflection, doubt, and sometimes guilt. This is what the document accomplishes. It acts as a mirror, reflecting not only the mind of the condemned, but our own perception of justice, morality, and truth. And as you feel the weight of these lines, you realize you're not just reading an account. You're being drawn into the experience, experiencing a silent transformation, shaping your mindset to understand what it means to confront the extreme limits of the human condition. There are passages where he dwells on nearly invisible details, like the light seeping through cracks, shadows moving on the walls, or the sound of the wind that seems to carry messages from outside to inside the cell. Each description is a revelation. The impact of the environment on the human mind, the feeling of absolute isolation, the psychological effect of coming face to face with one's own mortality. He understands intuitively that it's not just death that strikes, but the realization that it's inexorably approaching, that every remaining moment becomes precious, weighty, almost tangible. And even as he describes the inevitable, he finds room for manipulation and mystery. There are lines that feel like confessions, others that raise questions about events that should never have been revealed. He inserts observations about third-party decisions, about how small actions by guards or fellow inmates could alter the course of what was about to happen. Everything is observed with the coolness of someone who has already understood the impact of each movement, but also with the sensitivity of someone who recognizes the fragility of human life, the vulnerability of body and mind in the face of imminent execution. As you absorb these layers, you realize that the document functions like a web. Every physical detail, every psychological fragment, every partial revelation connects with the next, creating a complex web of perceptions that demands constant attention. And it is at this point that the story becomes even more unsettling. You realize that the voice echoing from the paper is not limited to what he experienced, but also to what he wanted you to feel, to question, to reflect on what it truly means to face your own death and yet leave traces of understanding and confusion. And as the narrative unfolds, he alternates between meticulous description and suggestion, between factual account and psychological provocation. At times, the document seems almost prophetic, as if anticipating how each word would be interpreted, the emotional reaction of those who dared to read it, the way tension and mystery would spread years after the execution. It's a rare skill, a demonstration of a mind's ability to transform extreme experiences into strategic narrative, to generate impact long after the physical body has been lost, keeping its presence alive through words. And, in the midst of it all, there's a silent connection with the reader. You realize you're not alone, that you're sharing a dark intimacy with someone who understands how to manipulate perception, how to harness curiosity, how to explore the other person's mind without physical contact. It creates an invisible, almost conspiratorial connection, as if to say, if you're reading this, you're part of what's left to tell. Feel it, question it, understand it. And it's at this point that the tension builds. You feel like every word is a fragment of a hidden truth, that every physical detail, every psychological observation, every reference to the prison's behind-the-scenes scene serves as a constant reminder that the story isn't over yet, that there are deeper layers, that the human mind is more complex than any document could fully capture. And as this realization sets in, you find yourself compelled to continue, to explore every nuance, every whisper, every shadow he left, knowing that the voice echoing from these lines is more alive than the death that condemned it, keeping you engaged, curious, attentive, ready to delve even deeper into what is yet to come. As you delve deeper into the echoes of the words, you begin to perceive a disturbing pattern that spans decades in prisons. It's not just one isolated convict leaving traces of his own death. Others also wrote, recorded, whispered to paper what they could never verbalize aloud. Each note, each carefully chosen phrase carries the same weight: behind-the-scenes observations, incomplete confessions, enigmas that defy interpretation. And yet they were all ignored. Files sealed, documents forgotten, manuscripts turned to dust. Why does this pattern repeat itself? What is it in these words that the system insists on keeping buried? There is something deeper, a hidden truth that transcends individual cases, something disturbing because it challenges the official narrative, because it reveals flaws in what society insists on calling justice. Do you feel the weight of this? Each letter is more than a report, it's a form of silent resistance. An attempt to transform extreme experiences into records that defy time. And as you read, you understand that each line carries decisions. Not just those of the convicted man, but those of the system, the authorities, those who control what can and cannot be known. There's a dance between confession and censorship, between the intention to reveal and the effort to conceal. Each word seems to carry the echo of thousands of previous decisions. Each silence is heavy, almost palpable, as if each absence of information were a conscious choice, an attempt to erase memories that could transform the perception of what really happened. And it is in this context that the first connections emerge, subtle but powerful. Details are repeated from prison to prison, from execution to execution. The metallic cold of the cells, the ritual of keys turning in the doors, the almost obsessive attention to the guards' movements, the perception of time stretching, of the imminence of death. These fragments overlap, creating a network of signals that only those who observe closely can perceive. It is as if these voices, even muffled ones, are trying to construct a collective narrative, showing that behind the execution there is more than simple punishment. There is a silent theater of power, control, and manipulation, where the truth often becomes an additional victim. As you delve into this analysis, it's impossible not to notice the psychological impact each account has. Each confession, even incomplete, acts as a direct blow to the reader's conscience. You feel the tension, the anticipation, the weight of decisions made years before. He describes transformations, internal shifts, as if every second spent in prison had been recorded not just as memory, but as a transformative experience, a cruel study of the human mind under extreme pressure. Each sentence is designed to provoke reflection, to test limits, to show that even death cannot completely silence what was felt, thought, and understood. And this perception generates curiosity, that visceral feeling of wanting to understand more. You notice patterns, repetitions, hidden signals between seemingly banal lines, and you begin to wonder, what kind of truth could be so powerful that it needs to be systematically suppressed? There are references to small injustices, questionable decisions by guards, observations about fellow inmates, details about how fear and psychological control function in the daily life of a convict. Each fragment increases the tension, provokes thought, and provokes the mind to go beyond what is written. The narrative, then, becomes a spiral, where each discovery leads to another, where every detail you absorb generates a sense of deep, almost physical immersion. You feel like you're there, inside the cell, breathing the same heavy air, feeling the same impact of every decision, every moment of silence, every calculated movement. And as your mind tries to digest this complexity, you realize the effect is cumulative. The more you read, the more aware you become of the web of influences, the complexity of power relations, the way truth can be manipulated and yet still try to emerge through forgotten documents and partially destroyed confessions. And it is at this point that the skill of the voices that traverse time becomes apparent. It's not just a matter of reporting events, it's about creating a legacy, a fine line between historical record and psychological provocation. Each message, even muffled, challenges you to decipher intentions, to perceive nuances, to interpret signs of manipulation and resistance. With each paragraph, the impact is emotional and intellectual. You don't just read, you feel, think, and question. And as the echoes of other executions become clearer, we realize something even more disturbing. The repetition is no coincidence. It suggests an intentional pattern, a control mechanism that muffles the voices that could change perceptions, transform mindsets, and reveal hidden decisions that shaped lives and destinies. Each surviving fragment is, therefore, a window into the backstage of a system that proves rigid, resilient, and, at the same time, vulnerable to the persistence of those who dare to write, even knowing they will be ignored. And between these lines, you feel the document's almost invisible call. It doesn't simply inform, but provokes, invites reflection, challenges your understanding of what is fair, what is real, and what is manipulated. And as you feel this tension growing, you realize that each fragment is a piece of a larger puzzle, an enigma that only begins to reveal itself to those who allow themselves to explore, question, and feel the impact of these revelations. And as these layers unfold, you begin to understand. The story isn't just about execution, confession, or censure. It's about how decisions, mindsets, and hidden truths intertwine, about the effect each choice can have decades later, about how silence can speak louder than any official testimony. Each word read is a silent transformation in the observer, an invitation to delve even deeper into the mind of those who left traces that time has failed to erase. And it is at this point that the narrative remains alive, breathing alongside you, ready to reveal the next layer of secrets, like a distant echo of other executions, other voices, other truths waiting to be discovered, felt and understood in all their complexity, leaving you hooked, tense, and curious about what is yet to come. As these words echo, I can't help but imagine the reader's reaction. The tension, the discomfort, that feeling of spying on something that should never be revealed. And that's where I want you to participate silently, almost secretly. If any phrase or word from what we've seen so far has moved you, if you felt the chill or the weight of something that seemed impossible to understand, write it down. Just a word, a line, a symbolic gesture that says, I felt it. I saw it. Because each comment isn't just a record, it's not just digital data. It's a fragment of the same experience, the same immersion, the same quest to understand the incomprehensible. Imagine that each letter typed is like a lit candle in the darkness of the cell, a dim light that connects the observer to what was recorded, that transforms their own perception into a living part of history. Don't underestimate the power of this gesture. Your participation is what keeps this web of memories, revelations, and impacts that span time alive. It's a silent, shared outpouring, a way of saying that you exist within this space we're creating together, that you feel together, that you question together. And as you type, you feel a strange sense of belonging, of being connected to something few dare to observe, of being part of a community that understands the weight, depth, pain, and complexity of the decisions that shaped everything they tried to hide. Each comment will be a small bridge between the past and the present, between the confession that echoed from the cell and the mind that now approaches, curious, investigative, sensitive to that which most will never understand. So, if any word touched you, if any fragment of this incomplete confession provoked a reaction you didn't expect, leave your mark. A single word, a small sign that you were there, that you felt the impact, that you recognized the hidden truth that transcends time. It is in this gesture that you become part of the narrative, transforming the experience of observation into active, silent, intense participation. And as you feel this, you realize that the document, the echoes of the executions, the muffled voices, all of this doesn't just exist in the past. It lives in the present, in you, in what you choose to write now. Each comment is a living fragment, a reminder that what seemed buried, forgotten, or censored still finds space to reverberate, still finds echoes, still finds consciousness to be recognized. So write. A word, a short phrase, a symbolic gesture. Because what you leave here won't just be reading, it will be shared memory, active participation, a silent record of those who dared to feel together, of those who dared to perceive the impact of choices, of hidden truths, of the behind-the-scenes that no one wanted to reveal. And as these words accumulate, invisible to the eyes of those who have never seen them, you begin to understand that the story isn't over, that it continues to pulse, breathing through every reaction, every comment, every sigh left here, silent but charged with meaning. And it is in this space of tension and belonging that we remain connected, attentive to what is yet to come, knowing that each participation is not just a record, but a living part of a narrative that will yet unfold, layer by layer, impact by impact, decision by decision. Stay with me because your every gesture echoes with these voices that should never be forgotten. The document's revelation didn't just impact the cold prison corridors or the dusty files of retired investigators. It fell like thunder upon those who already bore deep scars, the victim's family. Imagine the confusion, the shock, the weight of receiving, decades later, words that could both clarify and distort the memory of those lost. The paper had the power to spark doubts, to transform certainties into labyrinths of questioning. Each sentence, each carefully written line seemed to whisper, what if everything were different? What if the truth they believed they knew wasn't complete? The emotional impact on family members is something that cannot be measured solely by the time or intensity of the original event. There are wounds that open silently decades later, when someone decides the story needs to be revisited. And in this silence, every detail of the confession, every fragment of hidden information, weighs more heavily than any official judgment. There is something cruel in realizing that life moved on while the truth remained hidden, manipulated by invisible hands, controlled by decisions no one explained. This is where the perception of injustice mixes with curiosity, and the human mind, even wounded, feels an almost obsessive need to fill in the gaps, to understand, to reconstruct the fragmented narrative someone dared to write between cold walls and rusty bars. Meanwhile, another disturbing layer emerges. What about the condemned man's own mindset? He knew he would be ignored, that his words could be buried, censored, distorted. And yet he wrote. Not just for himself, but to leave traces of transformation, to release fragments of consciousness that could reverberate long afterward. Every decision he made, every word he chose seemed charged with intent. To manipulate, to reveal, to confuse, to leave an invisible legacy that would span time. The complexity of this act is staggering, and when you consider its impact, you realize that physical execution is not the end of the story, it is merely the starting point for something deeper, more subtle, and more disturbing. Have you ever felt that uneasiness, the feeling that you're seeing something you shouldn't but can't look away? That's exactly what the documentary provokes. It forces us to confront the hidden truth, to question decisions that seem definitive, to feel, even from a distance, the weight of each choice that shaped lives. And it's at this moment that I want you to connect with me intimately. Stay with me until the end because what you'll discover isn't just another piece of an ancient puzzle. It's the key to understanding patterns, intentions, and impacts that no one has dared to document before. Every second you spend here, every word you absorb, builds an invisible link between you and what lurks in the shadows of history. And observing the family's reactions, a fascinating effect emerges. The document not only reopens wounds, it provokes a silent internal dialogue. Family members begin to question, reflect, and revisit memories they thought were definitive. There's a mixture of pain and revelation, of indignation and curiosity. And you, witnessing this from the outside, feel a subtle transformation in your own perception. It's the psychological impact these confessions can have, even years later. You feel the weight of the hidden truth, the manipulation of emotions, the complexity of human decisions at play. As the layers of the story overlap, behind-the-scenes details begin to emerge that no one imagined. Guards who heard whispered words, erased records, movements that were deliberately ignored. Each fragment reveals more than the condemned man wrote. It reveals the system that operated in parallel, the environment that shaped behaviors, the hidden strategies that decided who could speak and who would be silenced. There's a density of information, of meanings, that demands attention and reflection, and that's precisely why staying until the end is crucial. Stay with me until the end, because each layer we explore together isn't just narrative, it's a transformation of perception. You're being invited to go behind the scenes, to feel the emotional impact, to understand the mindset of everyone involved, and to realize that every decision, every word, every silence, builds a mosaic of revelations that challenge everything believed to be definitive. And it's at this point that the story becomes almost palpable. You're not just observing, you're inside it. You feel the pressure, the tension, the fear, and the doubt that span generations. You feel the cumulative effect of human choices, of silent lies, of hidden truths that even when they emerge carry ambiguity. And as this complexity unfolds, the narrative continues to breathe, inviting you to delve even deeper, feeling every impact, perceiving every nuance, and preparing for what is yet to be revealed, with each fragment leaving an invisible but undeniable mark on your own consciousness. The document seems to breathe on its own, carrying an almost tangible energy, as if each word were chosen to echo far beyond the prison walls. Those who analyze it deeply suggest that this is not a simple confession or a sincere account. Perhaps it is a calculated act, the final gambit of a manipulator who understood human fragility and decided to exploit it to the limit. Each sentence, each pause marked by commas or blank spaces, acts like an invisible thread pulling at emotions, questions, regrets, or guilt. The mind of the writer knew the anatomy of pain, knew how to shape the perception of those who would read it decades later. If you look closely, you'll notice patterns that recur in other stories of condemned men. Silent gestures, hidden letters, statements that emerge after the execution, always with the same effect: unease and confusion. It's as if these documents were created with the intention of disturbing, of provoking reflection and discomfort, not of bringing clarity. The impact is immediate and profound because it touches something that remains hidden within us all: the need for truth, for justice, to understand what seems impossible to understand. But there's another, even darker level hidden between the lines: psychological manipulation. It's not just the content of the note that matters, but the effect it has. It transforms the reader, alters perceptions, questions certainties, and all this without any direct contact. The ability to create emotional tension, to plant doubt, is as powerful as any physical action he could have committed in life. Here the complexity of the condemned man's mindset is revealed: someone who used silence, absence, death itself as a tool of control. And by considering this hypothesis, each reader, each investigator, each family member becomes an involuntary part of a psychological experiment that transcends the time and space of prison. It's impossible not to think about the impact this has on those who witnessed the story. The victim's family faces new layers of pain, investigators relive procedures and decisions, and we, distant observers, are drawn into a game of perceptions and emotions. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover isn't just a revelation about the past. It's an opportunity to see patterns of behavior, hidden decisions, and how the truth can be manipulated in almost invisible ways. Every detail, every fragment, transforms the narrative into something more than a simple crime story. It becomes a profound study of the human mind, of cruelty, of control, of the persistence of intentions that defy time. As we analyze the words, the feeling begins to emerge that nothing is as simple as it seems. There are hidden intentions, calculated movements, small clues that indicate that each sentence has layers of meaning. A subtle observation, a name mentioned out of context, a disguised compliment or criticism, all of this becomes part of a mosaic of manipulation that defies immediate comprehension. And it is here that we realize how essential criminal psychology and careful observation of details become. Each decision, each word choice reveals much about the author's mindset, his perception of the world, and how he wished to be remembered, even after being silenced by execution. It's not just about understanding a crime, but about exploring the complexity of human intentions. The transformation that occurs when studying these documents is not just intellectual, it's emotional. We feel the discomfort of doubt, the tension of uncertainty, the weight of something that shouldn't be relived but insists on remaining active in our minds. And it's in this state that we begin to perceive the power of a manipulator. Not one who merely commits cruel acts, but one who, even in his absence, can alter perceptions, emotions, and memories. The behind-the-scenes details of this story are equally revealing. Guards who never commented on details, hidden records, analyses that only emerged years later. All of this reveals a network of human decisions that interacted with the document, amplifying its psychological effect. The hidden truth, far from simple, becomes an echo that resonates in every layer of investigation, memory, and interpretation. And as you consider this, you feel you're entering dangerous territory, where every revelation carries emotional consequences, every detail becomes impactful, and every silence, previously innocuous, proves strategic. And it is in this terrain of uncertainty and tension that the story continues to unfold, leading us to the next developments, where the line between confession and manipulation becomes increasingly blurred, and the need to understand, to feel, to decipher, intensifies with each word that echoes through time. Here, each fragment of information, each past decision, prepares us for something greater, something that can only be perceived as we continue, attentive, connected, immersed in the narrative that still pulses beneath the surface of what we know. The detail emerges like a spark in the darkness, small, almost unnoticed, yet weighty. It speaks of an object, a word, an action that was never officially recorded, something only those who experienced the crime could know. And it's impossible not to feel its impact. Each letter of the note, each fragment of a sentence, takes on a new dimension. It's a direct blow to our perception of what we believe to be reality. Now, it's no longer just an old document, It's a window into a truth the system seemed determined to bury. Can you imagine the tension of that moment? That instant when investigators revisit records, old notes, and testimonies, only to realize that everything they took for granted now hangs on a fragile thread. The sensation is dizzying. And at the same time, a slowly gnawing doubt arises. Was this the genuine confession of someone caught between guilt and manipulation, or just another calculated move by someone who understood human nature and decided to toy with it until the last second? The hidden truth becomes a puzzle that demands more than attention. It demands instinct, patience, and the ability to feel every emotional nuance that permeates the text. And it's fascinating to observe how the human mind reacts to these fragments. The impossible-to-ignore information creates an almost visceral reaction. Each reader becomes an unwitting accomplice, absorbing tension, doubt, and psychological impact. The behind-the-scenes of the investigation becomes palpable. The dark prison corridors, the dispatch desks, the forgotten files, all seem to come alive with the weight of this detail. It's a silent demonstration of the power of a single well-placed word, capable of destabilizing an entire narrative. Meanwhile, the reader senses a subtle but profound transformation. What was once certain dissolves. The mind bends before the complexity of human decisions. Understanding the document is not linear. It is fragmented, constructed in layers, like a mosaic that gradually reveals itself. And the deeper you delve, the more you realize that each element, each word, each pause, each hidden fragment, was deliberately chosen with surgical precision to generate maximum effect on the reader, on the investigator, on the experiencer. The emotional impact is inevitable. Doubt creeps into our thoughts. What if everything we knew was incomplete? What if the condemned man had truly left intentional clues so that even after his death, he would provoke reflection, tension, and even regret in everyone involved with his story? Every detail, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is loaded with meaning. And the feeling that there is a greater truth, something hidden between the lines, between forgotten files and veiled confessions, heightens the tension. Stay with me until the end, because this detail isn't just a point of curiosity, it's the key to beginning to understand the complexity of the mind that wrote the note, the subtle manipulation, and the devastating effect that a seemingly small piece of information can have on us all. It connects past and present, the execution and the belated discovery, and forces us to reflect on the boundaries between confession, manipulation, and truth. It's at this point that the layers of the story become almost palpable. Each investigation, each analysis, each fragment of memory that those involved try to recover adds depth to the narrative. The behind-the-scenes details, the human decisions, the gaps that previously went unnoticed now become vital. It's a reminder that transformation occurs not only in the convicted or the victim, but also in everyone who comes into contact with the story, in everyone who feels the psychological impact of a detail that challenges certainties. And as the story continues to unfold, we realize that every fragment of information, every carefully chosen word, every silent pause between lines keeps the tension alive, connecting past, present, and the possibility of the future. The impossible-to-ignore detail is more than a simple revelation. It is the door that leads us to the next layer of the mystery, where questions multiply, perceptions shift, and the weight of the hidden truth begins to become almost tangible. It is at this threshold between certainty and doubt that the narrative finds its most intense power. The audience feels the ground shake, not only from the crime, but from the emotional complexity that each revelation provokes. It is the tension of knowing that what appears simple may, in fact, hide layers of intentions, strategic decisions, manipulation, and profound psychological impact. Each fragment of the document resonates like an echo through time, reminding us that history, truth, and the effects of every human choice are far more intricate than we can perceive at first glance. And it is at this exact point, in this whirlwind of revelations, doubts, and emotional impact, that we approach the next chapter of the narrative, where the hidden layers of the document will become even more complex, challenging perceptions, emotions, and the very notion of what it means to face the truth that hides beyond the execution. The document remains on the table, its yellowed, time-worn edges seeming to pulsate, as if guarding a secret that insists on escaping. Each sentence, each line the condemned man wrote, echoes with an almost physical weight, and the feeling that we are faced with something greater than a simple account of a crime grows with each moment. It is impossible not to feel the emotional impact of each word, of each silence between them, as if he had foreseen not only the moment of his death, but also the effect his confessions would have decades later, in the eyes of anyone who dared to read them. The human mind reacts instinctively. We need to decipher, interpret, connect the dots, even when the line between truth and manipulation dissolves before us. The transformation is not merely intellectual, it is emotional. The document provokes unease, triggering memories, feelings, and doubts. It confronts us with the reality that decisions, intentions, and mindsets can transcend death, leaving traces that affect everyone who comes close to the story. Each reader becomes an involuntary accomplice, absorbing tension, reliving experiences, feeling the depth of each revelation. And even when we think we've understood, the text forces us to step back, to reconsider. There are hidden layers, hidden meanings, patterns that only reveal themselves with extreme attention. Each word is a glimpse into the mind of someone who understood human psychology in its rawest and most manipulative form. And it is at this point that the impact becomes most intense. We realize that the document is not just a confession or a riddle, but a silent experiment in perception, memory, and emotion. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to learn isn't just about the crime or the execution. It's about how hidden truth can persist, infiltrate the mind, transform interpretations, and alter the way we feel and understand the past. Each fragment of information carries weight and consequence, and by paying attention to the details, you begin to perceive patterns of human decision-making, manipulative strategies, and the complex psychology behind each action. The revelations go beyond what first appears. Guards who never spoke, records that remained sealed, observations that only emerge years later. All the behind-the-scenes details connect, creating a broader picture of intentions, consequences, and impact. The sensation is of entering almost forbidden territory, where every interpretation, every emotion, every thought is shaped by the skill of someone who understood human frailty. And as we absorb all of this, we realize we are faced with a layered narrative, in which each reading, each reflection, adds depth to the emotional experience. The tension intensifies when we consider the possibility of deliberate manipulation. The condemned man knew that the document could emerge years later, that it would be read, interpreted, and discussed. He engineered not just words but effects, building a bridge between his absence and the present, between the execution and the impact it would still have on those investigating, feeling, and trying to understand. Every line is a strategic decision. Every sentence carries hidden intentions that defy immediate comprehension and generate a profound psychological effect. And it is precisely in this realm of doubt and revelation that we reach the most powerful connection with you, the viewer. The story becomes collective. Your interpretation, your emotions, your reflections become part of the mosaic he left behind. That's why I want you to participate, to not just observe, but to interact, to share your perspective. Each comment is a piece that helps give meaning to the narrative, to complete the psychological impact that was carefully prepared, even after his death. There are no easy answers. The video isn't meant to offer definitive conclusions. The silence that remains is part of the effect, and it's in this silence that true unease sets in. The document exists now and you've read it. It has already fulfilled part of what seemed to be its ultimate goal: to provoke, disturb, challenge perception, and spark deep reflection. But there's still something greater hidden, something that only reveals itself when we look closely, feel closely, and interact closely. And it is at this point that I extend an invitation that goes beyond the screen. I want to hear from you. Do these final words, this document, this voice that spans time, ring true or manipulated? Your interpretation matters. Write in the comments, vent, share your perception. It is in this simple gesture that you become an active part of the story, adding layers, emotions, and reflections that go far beyond what any document could do alone. Each comment is an extension of the mystery, a piece that connects us, that makes us understand the real impact of words written with intention, planning, and awareness of the effect they would have decades later. The truth, the impact, the manipulation, everything lurks, pulsing between the lines and silences. And as you decide what to write, you feel the weight of each word, the echo of each intention, and the depth of a legacy that refuses to be silent. It is this territory, between doubt, emotion, and revelation, that slowly leads us to the next level of the story, where every forgotten detail, every ignored fragment, can finally become a revelation capable of altering everything we thought we understood about that condemned man, his document, and the impact his last words continue to have on us all. If you've made it this far, you've realized these words carry more than just crime stories. They carry echoes of truths that were hidden, manipulations that span decades, and decisions that have shaped lives. And now, it's time for you to become part of this silent investigation. If this documentary of memory, pain, and revelation touched you, leave a comment. I'm with you until the end. It's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes about those who follow the story until its final breath. And if this narrative made you feel the weight of silence, the impact of hidden truth, how about reinforcing that connection with a like? Each gesture is a response, a sign that you're not just watching but participating, reflecting on everything that's been revealed. The sense of justice, the instinct to question, and the curiosity about what's remained in the shadows are all echoed in this simple act. Stay with me because the journey doesn't end here. There's a video below that expands on this topic, revealing even more obscure details about confessions and secret documents the system tried to bury. Click through and stay with me there because the truth has layers, and each layer deserves to be uncovered alongside those who refuse to settle for easy answers. Here, every story, every revelation, every silence connects. By continuing this journey, you keep alive the flame of curiosity and indignation, the sense of belonging to those who seek to understand not only crimes, but what they show us about the human mind, about choices and consequences. So, comment, like, and continue exploring these truths with me. The story isn't over yet, and the next layer awaits you.